Peoples here again, and today we're going to be talking about a few more battles here. We're going to actually branch into 1863 and the battles that take place during 1863 in this section. There are two parts to this section, the Tide of War Turns Part 1 and Part 2. We're going to cover Part 1 briefly in this video lecture, get our notes down, and then in class we're going to actually look at the three battles here a little bit more closely and get into some more details about each of the battles. Your learning targets are that you can identify major battles and winners during the war, and that you can explain the importance of people from the Civil War. So we're going to be talking about three major battles in this section and a couple of different people too to remember. All right, let's get started. Okay, we last left off talking about the Battle of Antietam. And the Battle of Antietam took place in September of 1862, and it was a Union victory. And not long after that victory, George McClellan, the commander of the Union Army, was asked by Lincoln to follow up his victory by chasing Robert E. Lee back into the South and attacking them. Being that McClellan just won a victory, the Confederates surely would not be able to handle another fight. McClellan telegrams Lincoln saying, "Sorry, but we're not ready to move yet, but we'll move as soon as we're ready." Well, this goes on for about a month. Lincoln actually travels out to the Antietam battlefield and visits with McClellan in his tent. And McClellan promises President Lincoln that he's going to move, and then Lincoln gets back to Washington and he finds out that McClellan still hasn't moved. And so Lincoln fires McClellan and replaces him with another man, a man that you see on the bottom left here, Ambrose Burnside. He becomes the new Union general. And his plan is to attack Lee's army, which is sitting in the town of Fredericksburg, Virginia. Now, Burnside's plan was to quickly make it to Fredericksburg, cross the river using pontoon bridges, and attack Lee's army before they have time to prepare. But Burnside, unfortunately, had to deal with the pontoon bridges being delivered late. And so Burnside gets to Fredericksburg, but he can't attack because the pontoon bridges hadn't arrived. In the 2 or 3 weeks it takes for those bridges to arrive, Robert E. Lee takes up positions on the high ground of Fredericksburg. And even though Robert E. Lee was outnumbered, because he had such a commanding position on the hills, he felt confident that he could win this battle. Burnside, once the bridges showed up, had the soldiers build those bridges, and the Union soldiers marched bravely into the town of Fredericksburg, and then very bravely tried to attack the hill and the defenses that the Confederates had built. And each time they were killed. One regiment after another. Burnside kept sending more and more soldiers in, and more soldiers would get killed. It was, as one historian put it, simply murder. And so the Battle of Fredericksburg lasts a couple of days, and at the end of this couple of days, even though Lee was outnumbered, the Union Army loses this battle as well. And so this is another Confederate victory. So if you can think, let's go back now, let's talk about this. First and Second Bull Run, Confederates victories. Fort Sumter, Confederate victory. The 7 Days Battle, Confederate victory. Antietam was a Union victory, but now we have Fredericksburg, another Confederate victory. Well, this Battle of Fredericksburg happens in December of 1862. It's one of the only or few winter battles that took place. After the battle, both armies kind of just sat across the river from each other because of the winter conditions, and they didn't really fight. And so Burnside is removed from command, and another Union general is put in charge by Abraham Lincoln. His name is Joseph Hooker, and you can see him pictured there on the right. Now, in May of 1863, I should say April of 1863, Joseph Hooker plans to sneak around Lee's army and attack him from the rear. And it worked at first, but Hooker then waited for Lee to attack him. Had he attacked Lee, he probably could have won the battle. But he got around Lee and then waited. And Lee is outnumbered again, but he divides his army. and he sneaks around the Union himself. And he was able to do this because Joseph Hooker didn't attack. He was waiting for Lee to attack. Well, Lee sends Stonewall Jackson and his regiment around Hooker's army, and Stonewall Jackson's troops surprised the Union and pushed the Union back on itself. Now, during this particular part of the battle, Stonewall Jackson is wounded. He is shot by his own soldiers as he is out scouting for a possible night attack. And we're going to talk more about that in class. Jackson is taken from the battlefield down to a home where 12 days later he dies from pneumonia. We're going to talk specifically and directly about Jackson's death and his wounding. But the battle continues the next day with a replacement in charge of Jackson's troops, and the Confederates win a victory at Chancellorsville. This Battle of Chancellorsville became Lee's greatest victory because he divided his army twice in the face of a larger army and was still able to defeat the Union. Okay, so another victory for the Confederacy here in Chancellorsville. After the Battle of Chancellorsville, Abraham Lincoln in the spring of 1863 said, my God, what will the country think?" was his exact quotes after hearing about the loss at Chancellorsville. Okay, and we're going to talk more specifically and in more detail about that in class. Now, Lee, having come off that stunning victory against the Union in Chancellorsville, Lee decides to attack in the north once again. He tried it once in Antietam and was stopped. Well, now he believes he can do it again. So he marches his soldiers up into Pennsylvania, through Maryland, up into Pennsylvania, and his goal was to take places like Philadelphia and eventually come down and attack the capital of Washington, hoping that the Union would ask for peace, hoping that the British and the French would join the war. Gettysburg is where these two armies met. The town wasn't supposed to be a place where a battle was supposed to happen, but both armies kind of got there at the same time, and it becomes the largest and bloodiest battle of the war. Over the course of 3 days, some 23,000 Union and 28,000 Confederate casualties are killed, wounded, missing, or captured in that little small town of Gettysburg. The Union victory, it was a Union victory, and we're going to talk about it in detail in class, came the day before the Union capture of Vicksburg, which we talked about in a previous section. After the Battle of Gettysburg, Britain and France refused to help the South. And so the South's hope for cotton diplomacy did not work after the Battle of Gettysburg. Now, a few months after the Battle of Gettysburg, one of the problems that the town of Gettysburg had is that after the battle, there's all of these dead soldiers lying there on the field, and they had to be buried. And many of them were buried in shallow graves, and over the course of the summer, as rains and storms came in, those graves became exposed. And so the town of Gettysburg decides to build a cemetery. And in 1863, November of 1863, just months after the Battle of Gettysburg, the cemetery is set to be dedicated. And so those soldiers were then reburied in that cemetery. And a number of important people were asked to come to Gettysburg and dedicate this cemetery as a national cemetery for the soldiers of the Union. So this happens on November 19th, 1863, 4 months after the Battle of Gettysburg. Lincoln was asked to come say a few words kind of as an afterthought. And so he arrives in Gettysburg the night before. He writes most of his speech that night, and he comes to the Gettysburg battlefield and gives what is one of historians consider one of the greatest speeches in American history. That now is known as the Gettysburg Address. And it was a dedication of the Gettysburg Battlefield Cemetery. But in this speech, he praised the bravery of the Union soldiers and tried to get the rest of America to renew their commitment to winning the war. We're going to talk and look at this stuff a little bit more closely in class with some more detail. But I wanted to get this information out to you into your notes. This is the only known photograph of Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg. This happened just moments after he finished his speech. And you can see him, he's located right here, just as he's sitting down after giving his speech. You can see kind of the blurred face of Abraham Lincoln. And I'll show you in class where that picture was the original picture that came from, and some other interesting details as we go. This is what is believed to be the speaking copy of the Gettysburg Address. This is on display in the White House in the Lincoln bedroom today. Sometimes they bring it out and have it as showings for museums, but this is supposedly the handwritten paper that he read the speech from that day on November 19th, 1863. Okay. Let's talk about a couple people from this Battle of Gettysburg. First, the Union general at this time. Hooker is fired after the Battle of Chancellorsville, and the man you see on the left, George G. Meade, is named the Union general just days before the Battle of Gettysburg. He was known for his temper, and he continues to be the Union general for the rest of the war. The guy you see on the right is a man named George Pickett. And George Pickett is important because on the third day of the Battle of Gettysburg, he was asked to lead his 15,000 men in an attack on the Union lines. The attack fails, and it becomes known as Pickett's Charge, probably one of the best known charges, failed charges in American history. And you can see a picture of George Pickett there below. Okay, you can make sure that you get those notes into your notes pages. Everything in blue that you need to get that down into your notes. If you need to pause this, if you need to go back and get those copied, please do so. And we're going to talk more about these in detail in class, but I wanted to get you the basic notes information here so that you were prepared to discuss things in class. All right, we'll see you in class. Have a great day.